So this is the El Jabali vineyard.
So they haven't pruned back yet, or will they not prune these back?
They will prune these back. And I would imagine they'll do that any day now. Right now is definitely the time to do it. So this vineyard was planted in 1983, and this is one that was part of the Sanford winery, and that Richard Sanford was able to hold on to through the separation. And what this is Pinot Noir, planted on both sides of the road. And then about halfway up the road, it turns to Chardonnay.
Is there a point where the grapevine gets too aged and is not as productive, and they have to tear it out and put a new?
There is, and where you find that most with California wines is you'll see labels that say Old Vine Zinfandel, because Zinfandel was one of the first varietals that was planted that is still in existence around California. And over time, the yields drop off, but going back to that whole yield, lower yields, higher quality, you sacrifice. But at about 50 years in California is where they typically replant.
Oh, well, that's a huge time.
Huge time, yeah. So these vines here have plenty of time. Typically, you'll find that vines get pulled out in California, not because they've run their course of production, but because trends have changed. People are no longer drinking Merlot. They're wanting to drink Syrah now. Or the clone is no longer appropriate. That particular strain of Pinot Noir isn't as popular. Or there are better ones. Or the trellising system. This trellis system here is called California Sprawl. It was very popular in the 80s and 70s, but you won't find any new plantings being done this way. You can see how full it is and how wide and how much lower it is to the ground. California Sprawl. The new technique is called vertical shoot positioning, or VSP, where they have everything very linear, and that's the common
higher yield.
This seems linear to me.
Because of the space, or
it's space. It's also ease of picking and getting in between the rows. It's also maximizing photosynthesis. So if you don't have as many leaves overlapping, then the plant can be more productive.
So you're almost espalieting the grape.
What does espaliating mean?
Right, you take a fruit tree and you flatten it out against a wall. It's called espaliating.
Yes, very much. And then the orientation, the direction that the vines are planted.
Yeah, a tree. Wow.
Sorry. we're the
Shiny.
ADD crowd.
Look at those trees. They're really cool.
Sycamore.
See?
Legacy.
We're just talking about that.
Well, there's some of the Spanish moss I was talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
ADD crowd.
Except I don't have ADD, so I feel bad. Contributing.
That's what you said.
So the Sanford family lives up here on this hill, so they were fully aware of all that traffic that was going to the new entity.
They weren't allowed to have a tasting room at that time, or they just hadn't set it up yet, or?
Well, they did have a tasting room, but it was over in the town of Buellton. So I don't know exactly how the whole thing went down, but part of the separation, and I think at the time the Sanfords were kind of confused as to, okay, what do we do next? And we have these grapes, but maybe we should just sell them for the time being. So, because they weren't quite organized yet with the label.
Oh, so they weren't venting their own, they were just selling the...
I think at that point, that year, they were selling a lot more grapes than they were making some wine in the 04 and 05 vintage, but I think for the most part, they didn't want to have a big tasting room. They didn't want that expense, and so they did lease this out to the new Sanford winery. But this is where they filmed the scene in Sideways where Jack's chewing gum during the tasting room. Remember that?
Oh, look at the fruit on the...
Oh, yeah.
So, did you have to start incorporating Sideways in all your stuff because of the...
So next we're going to another scene.
Yes.
So Sam, if you get your table, can I have my Icelandic?
Sure. I love the